Hello everyone, dear friends. So, it's summer, it's hot, and we all want to be closer to water, but that's not always possible. But what you can do is set up a pool. Although, not everyone has the space for a large pool. So, if we can't put it above ground, we'll bury it. For about 5 years, I had a 3.06 by 0.77 m pool. I'll say this, it's good for kids, but a bit small for an adult. So, I decided to get a larger one, 3.66 meters in diameter and 1.22 meters deep. It fit perfectly, but to keep it from taking up all the space in the yard, I decided to bury it. In this video, I'll show you in detail how I did it. I'll share my ideas, life hacks, and more. Keep watching if you're interested in this topic. We begin with marking the area. I already had a 306 centimeters frame pool, and as you can see there's no lawn inside the circle anymore, there was just a mat. The new pool is larger, 366 centimeters. So, I lay out the new frame and carefully mark where it will sit in the yard. The dirtiest and heaviest part is, of course, digging the hole. I made the diameter with some margin about 40 centimeters larger than the pool so that it's easier to work later during installation. I didn't haul the soil too far, it'll come in handy later for backfilling the sides. And the top layer of fertile black soil is best saved, it can be used to restore the lawn. I, for example, carefully packed it into 10 bags. It's very important to make the edges as straight as possible, with no slopes. Any tilt can cause problems both during setup and use. I dug about 80 centimeters deep from lawn level, considering the pool itself is 122 centimeters high. To level the bottom, I used a 390 centimeters wooden beam, a rake, a shovel, and a level. This is one of the most critical steps. If the bottom isn't flat, there will be issues with pool tilting and uneven water levels. We worked together and tried to make everything as precise as possible. After leveling, I always cover the hole to protect it from rain, especially if the work stretches over several days. For this, I use a regular tarp stretched over the perimeter and secured with clips and boards. This protects the bottom from erosion and dirt in case of rain. I spent a long time thinking about how best to make supports for the pool legs. Placing them directly on polystyrene is a bad idea, as over time the legs would just press through it. In the end, I decided to use these concrete tiles, 40 by 40 centimeters. The pool has 12 legs in total, so I bought 3 tiles and cut each into 4 pieces, resulting in exactly the number of supports needed. In the end, I got 12 20 by 20 centimeters tiles, one for each pool leg. The tiles are very strong and heavy, and will easily handle the load. I slightly beveled the cut edges, I'll show you later why that's important. The weather suddenly turned bad, rains and downpours began, so to keep the pit from being completely washed out, I covered it with a heavy-duty PVC banner. I secured it with long screws, and it did a good job of protecting the base from moisture. By the way, this banner will come in handy again later, I'll show you how. Since the weather wasn't suitable for continuing, I started thinking about how to protect the middle part of the pool. You'll understand later what I mean. I wanted to create something like a skirt, and I found this material in the roofing section. It's a butyl rubber tape with a foil layer inside. It's resistant to UV rays, water, and damage. It comes in black and brown. I chose brown. I also decided to test in advance how the PVC banner would adhere to the pool liner. I happened to have a special PVC adhesive, Cosmofen SL 660.220. I did a test bond, took a patch from the pool kit and a piece of banner, applied a normal layer of glue, and left it for 24 hours. The result was excellent. It bonded permanently and could only be torn off by damaging the PVC itself. The seam was smooth and strong, so this method will work well for future steps. It's best to install this type of pool in hot weather, since the material becomes softer and easier to smooth out. But before that, I recommend letting it sit in assembled form for at least a couple of days. This helps reduce the number of folds and makes it easier to adjust the shape precisely. The heat was just around the corner, so I assembled and spread it out at home in advance. Some moisture still got into the pit, and considering the soil is clay here, that became noticeable. The edges slightly crumbled and the bottom became less even. So I went around the entire perimeter, removed washed up clumps and crumbled soil, and leveled the base again carefully to restore the right shape. Working with clay turned out to be quite hard, so I decided to bring in 6 bags of sand. I spread it across the entire bottom surface and carefully leveled it. Sand is much easier to work with, it compacts easily and provides a more even surface. I didn't soak it with water because I planned to start laying the underlayment and installing the pool bottom the same day. For the pool base, I chose polystyrene foam sheets 30 mm thick. In my opinion, that's enough. It provides soft cushioning without eating up too much depth. One very important point: choose sheets with interlocking edges on all sides. These pieces join better, don't shift, and create a more rigid structure. Also pay attention to the surface. The smoother it is, the better. I've seen sheets with large decorative grooves. Those definitely won't work, especially if you're not using an extra layer under the liner. I specifically picked sheets with a fine texture like in the photo. It's minimal and not noticeable underfoot. I lay the sheet starting from the center, leaving about half a sheet's width around the edge. This makes it easier to place the pool legs and their supports later. I glue the sheets together using low expansion construction adhesive foam. That's important because regular foam can lift the sheets and ruin the flatness of the base. I use a gun with a narrow nozzle for accurate application. It's easier to control the amount and fill the seams. The main thing: don't be afraid to pour generously. Excess foam can be trimmed later, and the joints will be as strong as possible. And well, after applying the adhesive foam, each piece needs to be pressed down for 5 to 10 minutes. Any available tools work well for this: a shovel, broom handles, boards, or even a bucket of sand. The main thing is not to rush and avoid separation. Meanwhile, the chief supervisor, my dog, was watching the process from the raspberry patch, making sure I didn't miss a single seam. He seemed satisfied, which means we were doing it right. We handled the bottom sheet laying pretty quickly. The whole job took about 3 hours. The key is to plan everything in advance and cut the needed shapes beforehand to minimize adjustments during installation. After finishing the layout, we let the foam dry a bit. Usually 20 to 30 minutes is enough, but it's better to wait longer if you're in the shade. Once the foam is fully cured, I trimmed off the excess with a sharp utility knife. This is important not just for appearance but also to prevent bumps under the pool liner. The result was a flat, firm, and springy base, exactly what you need for comfort and durability. Once the base is ready, we move to the next stage: assembling the pool frame outside the pit and carefully placing it inside on top of the polystyrene. This is not for the final installation but to mark the exact spots where the frame legs will stand. Using a measuring tape, we measure the distances between all supports. They must be equal all around. Once the frame is aligned, I mark each leg position with a marker. These marks will be useful later when preparing the support pads. After marking all the leg positions, I begin cutting out spots for the concrete supports. Each tile is 20 by 20 centimeters, and I carefully cut corresponding recesses into the polystyrene with a utility knife. It's important to do this as precisely as possible so the tile sits exactly in the center of the future leg. I adjust the depth so that only the beveled part of the tile sticks out above the surface. If the soil under the insulation is soft or loose, it's best to compact it well under each tile. You can use a wooden beam or even a bottle filled with sand. The supports should be stable, without any wobble or tilt, because each one will bear a significant load once the pool is filled. Don't forget to sweep or even vacuum the base thoroughly. For extra reliability, I covered each concrete tile with a 30 by 30 cm square of PVC banner. This softens the contact point between the legs and the surface and prevents direct friction on the concrete. I pre-marked the center of each tile with a marker to ensure the leg would land precisely where it should. Under the pool itself, I laid the same PVC banner I previously used to cover the pit from rain. I made its diameter slightly larger than the pool liner, 380 centimeters, so it extends beyond the legs and partially onto the side walls. This layer adds extra protection for the liner against wear from the insulation and possible ground movement. After that begins a crucial stage: installing the pre-assembled pool frame directly into the pit. The key here is not to try and make it perfect on the first attempt. Just go around 2 to 3 times, align each leg to the center of its tile, and make sure everything is standing level. Final adjustments will still need to be made during the water filling process. The frame will naturally settle into position. Now we move on to the final and very important step: smoothing the pool liner's bottom. As soon as we start filling the pool, we send in the most fearless team member. While there's just 3 to 5 centimeters of water, he should walk around the perimeter, back to the wall, smoothing the liner with his heels. The idea is simple: the weight of the person and the tension of the material can remove nearly all the wrinkles, but only if done before the water pressure increases. The key is not to miss this moment. If you add too much water, it'll be impossible to flatten the bottom. The liner will press down into its folds and stay that way. This simple trick helps achieve a perfectly flat surface, which is both aesthetically pleasing and safer to use. Do this until the bottom is completely smooth. You can now assemble the ladder. since the brave team member needs to get out of the filling pool. Just remove the connecting section for easy access. As you can see for yourself, the bottom turned out nearly perfect. No wrinkles, everything is flat. That's very important not just for looks but also for comfort. No bumps underfoot, everything is smooth just like in a built-in pool. After this, we continue filling, because now our goal is to eliminate side folds on the walls. This is also a good time to finalize leveling the pool legs. They're already partially seated on the tiles, but as the water pushes down harder, you'll be able to fine-tune each one. In these photos, you can see that some of the legs ended up slightly off-center from the marks. Don't worry, it's not critical, and we'll definitely correct it later once the liner has fully taken shape. To prevent the edges of the PVC underlayer from getting in the way, I fixed them to the pool walls using regular double-sided tape. This keeps them from bending under the legs and ensures smooth operation going forward. While the pool is filling, I connected the hoses to the filtration pump. When the bottom is already flat and the water has risen to about 1/3 of the liner's height, we reach a key stage, leveling the legs. At this point, the frame is still adjustable, so it's the best time to check everything with a level. I use a construction level to check each vertical leg one by one. If a leg is tilted inward or outward, it must be corrected. Don't forget, this must be done now, before the water fills the entire pool. It'll be very difficult to adjust afterward. The next equally important step is protecting the pool side walls using polystyrene foam sheets. The pool is already filled, and the liner sides are almost wrinkle-free. Since I plan to lay the lawn right up to the pool liner, the foam sheets need to be 10 to 15 centimeters lower than lawn level. I also bought 30 mm thick polystyrene sheets. I chose ones with grooves only on one side, since I didn't need grooves on the top or bottom. The sheet length was 120 centimeters, but I needed 65 centimeters, which resulted in a lot of leftover material, but it is what it is. I glued 2 polystyrene sheets together along the seam. This made a strong, stable base for future backfilling. In the meantime, the pool was ready for a quick test. The water was warm, the float held up, so everything was going according to plan. While the foam sheets were gluing, I moved on to the next important step, preparing the protective edge of the liner. Since the pool will be surrounded by a tight frame, I decided to add extra protection to the lower outer part of the liner. For this, I cut the PVC banner into strips 30 centimeters wide. That's enough to overlap the polystyrene foam sheets that will be mounted later. Where the legs go, I left 15 centimeters of extra material on each side so I could wrap around them and seal the area completely. Before gluing, it's important to degrease both the liner and the banner. This is the only way to ensure a strong and durable bond. I marked the height line with a marker in advance. For me, it was 65 centimeters from the base. After that, I started gluing each section around the circle, pressing and smoothing the material thoroughly. While continuing the gluing process, it's important to understand that although the glue sets almost instantly, full polymerization takes about 12 hours. To hold the strips in place during that time and prevent shifting, I reinforced the glued areas with reinforced duct tape. This is especially useful at curved sections and where the segments meet. If there are any small imperfections during the process, no worries. All of it will be hidden under the ground, and on top of that, I plan to apply the butyl rubber tape along the full length of the skirt. This will add extra sealing and protect against moisture and mechanical damage. Shortly after starting the gluing process, I ran into a problem. One section of the PVC skirt detached from the pool liner. The reason turned out to be water that had seeped onto the underlayer from the pool. Where did the moisture come from? It was simple. I hadn't checked whether the drain valve plug was fully tightened. As a result, a slow leak began. Because of that, the underlayer detached, sand and soil got in. I had to clean everything out, soak up the water, and reattach the underlayer to the liner again. Once the polystyrene sheets were glued and the protective skirt was securely fixed around the liner perimeter, it was time to let the glue do its job. This process requires time and a lack of vibrations or moisture. So, to not waste time, I moved on to the next important stage, installing the filter. Installing the filtration system before backfilling allows you to conveniently connect all the hoses, check for leaks, and easily make corrections if needed. Installing the filtration system is the final touch before full pool operation. In my case, I chose a sand filter model because it requires less maintenance and provides stable, efficient filtration compared to cartridge filters. The pump was installed on a pre-prepared platform. This is important so it doesn't sit directly on the ground. All hoses were carefully connected, and the fittings were checked for leaks. Before starting the system, I filled the filter with special quartz sand and filled the system with water to prevent it from running dry. After that, I switched on the pump, and water filtration began immediately, with the required disinfecting chemicals already added and a skimmer installed. The distance between the leg centers came out to 96 centimeters. Based on this, I cut the glued polystyrene sheets to size. I placed the flat edge on the ground, and the trimmed top part went under the skirt. To keep the skirt from interfering with the work, I taped it to the liner using reinforced duct tape. Otherwise, it would have gotten in the way during tile installation. For easier fitting, the sheets were trimmed alternately from opposite sides, one from the right edge, the next from the left. This allowed me to create interlocking joints and minimize the number of glued seams. Only 6 joints needed to be thoroughly glued. The rest clicked into place groove to groove. Each sheet was placed with the flat bottom edge resting on the base, with glue applied to the lower sides and center. To ensure tight contact between the insulation and the liner, and to secure it between the legs, I used spacers cut from leftover polystyrene. Construction adhesive was applied especially to the lower parts for strong bonding with the surface. I also used improvised weights to hold the structure in place while the glue cured. Each sheet was pressed firmly to the liner and the legs. If any seams started to separate slightly, I added more foam. This is the result. Don't skimp on foam, it'll be buried underground anyway. What matters is strength and protection of the liner and legs. I didn't glue the bottom edge entirely, leaving a small drainage gap in case moisture builds up under the liner. To help with drainage, I bought 6 more bags of sand, since my clay soil wouldn't handle water well. Once the glue had fully dried, I began sealing the area around the pool legs. This part is especially vulnerable, as after backfilling, moisture and dirt can get in, especially during watering or rain. To prevent this, I decided to glue on a protective skirt made from banner fabric. At each leg, I made neat cuts along the sides of the pipe to wrap the material around it from both sides. Then I applied glue thoroughly and fixed it in place. It's important to use plenty of glue to ensure a strong bond. For temporary fixation and to reinforce the seams, I used reinforced duct tape. It holds well in the beginning and gives the glue time to set properly and securely. Once all the lower cuts were sealed and the bottom skirt secured, I moved on to the finishing layer. For this, I took the second part of the banner, which had been left overlapping, and carefully stretched it over the fixed structure. I made the cut slightly offset from the lower ones to avoid creating through channels for water. Each segment was carefully glued and pressed into place. Finally, I went over the seams again with reinforced duct tape, especially at the overlaps. It gives extra hold and protects the edges from peeling. The result is a solid, double-layer waterproofing barrier that can be safely backfilled with soil. Once all the connections were complete, we ended up with a sealed and neat liner wrap, ready for backfilling and use. But the so-called holders, which press the polystyrene to the pool liner, are not removed yet. They'll stay in place until almost the end of the project. Now it's time to bring in a sieve like this one. There should be no stones, glass, or other debris in the soil and sand. I poured out all the sand and soaked it thoroughly with water. This will serve as our drainage layer and also help fill any small gaps between the polystyrene sheets that might remain. After the main waterproofing was installed, the most monotonous part began, backfilling the gap between the pit walls and the polystyrene insulation. This task isn't fast, but it's very important. You have to fill it carefully, in layers, trying not to damage the PVC banner skirt. It's especially important to make sure that dirt doesn't get into the skirt folds, and if it does, I tried to wash it out immediately with water. This helps not only avoid air pockets but also compacts the soil in the process. After watering, it becomes dense enough that I could remove the temporary supports. The structure now held itself in place. From the leftover polystyrene, some construction foam, and a couple hours of spare time, I made an improvised cat boat. It's not exactly stylish, but it's spacious and warm inside. The cat jumped in almost right away. We didn't test it in water, even without floating. It's clear he doesn't want to be the captain of this vessel. It was time to apply the second edging. For this, I bought 15 meters of 15 centimeter wide bitumen butyl rubber tape with extra length, so I wouldn't have to skimp on quality. The first thing that surprised me was how incredibly sticky it was. Peeling off the cardboard backing was a struggle. One side of the tape is already covered with a brown protective layer. It doesn't scratch and even slides under a knife. The other side has a transparent film, hiding what can only be described as sticky hell. That's the side that provides the sealing. The material turned out to be very convenient to work with. It lays flat, is elastic, and doesn't require heating. A great solution for pools and any outdoor construction where waterproofing is important. The key is to apply it carefully the first time. Once it sticks, there's no pulling it off without damage. At this stage, I marked the perimeter of the pool with a line from the top edge so that the tape would be applied neatly and evenly. I also allowed for an overlap onto the PVC skirt so the transition would look seamless and sealed. For now, the tape was just unrolled and measured. I planned to glue it later after final preparations. The next step was getting ready to apply the bitumen tape. I had already gathered all the necessary tools for the job. First, a metal roller, great for evenly pressing down the tape to bond it firmly to the surface. Second, a plastic squeegee with a felt pad. This is especially handy for delicate areas where you don't want to damage the surface. Of course, you can press it down with your hands, but that risks leaving air bubbles and getting poor adhesion. With these tools, application is not only smoother but much more reliable. You really need two people for this, one to pull the tape and peel off the backing, and the other to press and roll it down. I did it alone. At first, I applied small sections, then rolled them out. No heat gun needed, just make sure the weather is warm. The tape sticks hard. If I placed it a bit wrong but hadn't pressed it yet, I could gently peel it off and re-stick it. I glued it right over the seam and the banner. I didn't spend too much time aligning it perfectly. This part would be buried anyway. And let's not forget the tedious part. We still had to raise the soil level almost to the top of the polystyrene. Pour, soak. The applied bitumen tape doesn't fear moisture. Here's how the bitumen tape laid around the pool perimeter. Any minor imperfections will be hidden by grass later. When gluing between the support legs, I temporarily removed the spacers one by one, then put them back. The soil hadn't fully pressed the polystyrene to the liner yet. Another day of work done, we leave the pool alone for now. Since I had some bitumen tape left, I decided to wrap the support legs with it as well, so there would be no direct contact with the ground. In addition, I used leftover adhesive to make small caps at the points where the banner was fastened. The glue was left over from previous projects. It's elastic, rubber-like, and won't hurt for extra protection. I also marked the upper edge of the pool to use as a guide for placing the next layer of tape. I leveled everything to avoid any crooked lines later on. We continued backfilling with soil and soaking the ground. I applied the bitumen tape so that it overlapped the PVC skirt and slightly wrapped around the support leg. The seam was positioned behind the leg, completely hidden. Everything looked neat. I noticed a small wrinkle had formed, nothing major, but still annoying. A heat gun and a little time, and it was almost like it never happened. Let's take a little break and check the water chemistry in the pool. I bought a small kit to test for chlorine, bromine, and pH levels. I wasn't too concerned with bromine, but pH is very important. If it's too high or too low, pool chemicals won't work properly. And if chlorine is low, it's also ineffective. The ideal pH range is 7.2 to 7.8, with 7.4 to 7.6 being optimal. If pH goes above 7.8, chlorine becomes less effective against microbes and the water may turn cloudy. If pH drops below 7.2, the acidic water can irritate eyes and corrode equipment. Chlorine levels should be between 1 and 4 ppm for proper disinfection. The principle is simple. Fill the container, add 5 drops from each tester, and compare the results. In my case, pH was 8.2, that's too high, so I'll be reducing it. Let's not forget that we still need to install the ladder. I adjusted it using a level, but added a slight tilt toward the lawn. That wasn't accidental. This way, it's easier to rinse off the ladder, and dirt won't drip into the pool. A small thing, but a nice one. At this stage, you really start to feel that everything is coming together. Even though I plan to remove the ladder for winter, I still spent a lot of time thinking about how to protect these thin-walled metal tubes from rust. A few seasons in wet soil, and their strength could be gone. The solution turned out to be simple and effective: thick-walled PVC pipe. I used 32 mm diameter pipe and cut 70 cm for each leg. Reliable, simple, and cheap. We checked the ladder angle with a level again, and once more soaked the ground between the polystyrene and the pit wall. Then I marked the angle. I marked how much of the pipe would go into the ground and how much would remain above. The main thing was that the ladder had to be stable, and the PVC cover had to prevent the metal from touching soil. Then I cut off the bottom part from the second ladder section and slid the prepared PVC pipe over the remaining leg up to ground level. It fit tightly. I used gentle tapping with a hammer or simply pressed and knocked the edge on asphalt. It went on snugly and stayed in place. I also wrapped the joint between the metal leg and the PVC pipe with leftover bitumen tape. This step certainly doesn't hurt, especially since that part of the metal will be underground. The bitumen adds extra protection from moisture and corrosion. Plus, I didn't want a blue PVC pipe sticking out of the ground, so it's also about aesthetics. The rest was simple. Just hammer the prepared pipes into the ground to the required level. My site has a slope and a small pit in that area, so I plan to backfill with topsoil. Right now, the PVC pipes stick out a little above ground level, but after leveling the surface, they'll sit lower. They go in tightly, no wobbling. Next, I secured the ladder with the screws from the kit. Everything was already measured to the correct height, so I fastened it right in place. The screws have Phillips heads and come with washers and plastic nuts to avoid scratching yourself. They screw in easily and hold firmly. Then it was time for the black soil. I filled this part by hand, without a shovel. Each scoop was sifted through my fingers. The reason is simple. Even a small stone caught between the PVC skirt and the pool liner could eventually wear through the banner or even puncture the liner itself. That can't be allowed. So this is probably the most delicate part. Carefully, layer by layer, I filled the remaining 10 centimeters of the pit with clean, sifted topsoil. And don't forget to water each layer. That's the only way the soil will compact tightly and reliably. I made a fairly large mound of topsoil around the pool liner, but at the same time, I kept a close eye to make sure the level didn't rise above the line of the bitumen tape. That's important, otherwise, water would collect and eventually seep toward the base. I plan to level out the lawn slightly and create a gentle slope so that all water from rain or irrigation naturally drains away from the pool. After multiple rounds of watering, the height of the mound settled a bit, the soil compacted naturally. Still, it remained higher than the main lawn level and maintained the intended slope away from the liner. That's exactly what I needed, to prevent water from pooling at the base and ensure it flows away down the slope. I kept adding more topsoil, tamping it down and watering it. The process was done in layers: add soil, level it, water, and then lightly compact. Bit by bit, I leveled the area around the pool to get a dense, stable base without gaps or future sagging. And finally, the moment of truth. The water had warmed up, the sun was shining, the mood was great. Time for testing. Splash, and you're in. First impressions: amazing. Everything holds, nothing creaks, nothing bends, the ladder is stable, and the legs are firmly anchored. The bottom is smooth and comfortable. And swimming, by the way, went perfectly. I was doing laps, splashing around, and the mood soared into summer. I leveled the lawn using the leftover topsoil. I had been planning to do that for a long time, but as usual, never got around to it. And now everything came together. I had the soil, and a perfect reason to do it. I also smoothed out all the bumps, so the lawnmower won't jump around anymore, and the overall look became much neater. Just in time, I managed to reseed the grass to restore the lawn, and literally the next day it started raining. Nature took care of the watering, so now I just have to wait for the first sprouts to appear. One of the nice bonuses was this neat little fountain, which my friend made on a 3D printer. It runs off the return flow from the pump and creates a very pleasant sound of trickling water, adding a bit of coziness and life to the pool setup. And to make everything more convenient, he also printed a simple but reliable holder for the pool skimmer. Now it's always within reach and not lying on the ground. It might seem like a small thing, but comfort is made of details like these. Huge thanks to him. To monitor the water temperature, I bought a simple digital thermometer with an external sensor. The display is attached to the pool frame with 2 zip ties, and the external sensor is gently placed in the water and secured to the ladder pipe with another zip tie. Now you can instantly see whether the water is comfortable for swimming. And meanwhile, the lawn, which had endured the construction and pool installation, is slowly coming back to life. The grass is beginning to recover and fill in the end. I also plan to build a cover for the pump, because ideally it shouldn't be left on a wet surface during the summer. The pump has its own timer, so you can set it to run for 5 hours. But it runs for 5 hours straight, and I don't always want that. That's why I connected this pump through a smart relay. The relay can be either Zigbee or Wi-Fi. I set up a schedule like this. If needed, I can turn it on or off remotely from anywhere in the world. I highly recommend using a skimmer. I'm not even mentioning the mushroom, because here's what happens when chlorine is spilled past it. Nothing serious, but it discolors the coating. We decided to leave the ladder like this. Why? Because when you're swimming, you can lift the ladder and place it on top. That way, there's much more room in the pool. We also 3D printed this little fountain. I expected the water stream to go a bit farther, at least to here. But it creates a pleasant trickling sound, a mini fountain of sorts. And here's a little unicorn with a glass of juice. I'll leave a link in the description. It's really useful. Besides the regular thermometer, I also want to buy a smart one, the kind that measures all sorts of parameters, chlorine, pH, temperature, and sends all that to the smart home system. But that's for next time. As you can see, the grass has grown. The pool stands very firmly, and once the grass develops a full root system, it'll be perfect. Inside, you can't even tell it's a frame pool. No way to punch through it with your foot or knee. It's very sturdy. The floor is quite soft. Right now it's 27.3 degrees Celsius outside, and the water temperature is 26.8 degrees Celsius. So overnight, thanks to the fact that the bottom and about 80% of the walls are insulated with foam board, the water doesn't really cool down, even overnight. You can also lay a special film over the top. I'll drop a link in the description. A bubble film that not only helps warm and insulate the water, but also protects the pool from bugs, mosquitoes, and debris. Now let's talk about what I'll do in winter. First thing, I'll remove the ladder. I'll just pull it out of the ground. I'll remove the pump, and I'll drain the water to about ground level, maybe slightly below. There's a special cushion sold on AliExpress. If ice forms, it compresses and expands. So it's the cushion that gets squeezed, not the pool walls. For a more budget option, you can toss in 10 10-liter bottles filled with a bit of sand or water and sealed. Then it's the bottles that will get compressed by ice, not the liner. But in my region, I don't think it will freeze deeper than 10 centimeters, maybe 20 at most. So if you found this video interesting, give it a like. If you have questions, ask them, I'll be happy to answer. Maybe I skipped or forgot something. If you have comments, whether relevant or off-topic, leave them too, we'll discuss. I'm not a professional builder, of course, but I think I did everything as correctly as possible. People have had pools like this buried for 5 to 7 years already, so I believe mine will hold up too. You'll find all the product links in the video description, everything I'd recommend for a pool setup. There's also a link to the Telegram group, where you can ask questions and get answers, about smart homes and pools alike. You'll also find the Smart Home Forum and links to social media, X and Facebook. Join in, it'll be interesting. If the video was helpful to you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I've got plenty more interesting content, smart home and DIY projects included. Wishing you all the best, peace, and kindness. See you next time.